January 21st. Welcome to the morning show. I'm Doug Donnelly. Let's get to the weather. Today will be sunny with a high near 35, breezy with a northwest wind 16 to 20 miles per hour with gusts as high as 32 miles per hour. Tonight will be mostly clear with a low around 20, northwest wind 3 to 6 miles per hour. Winds could gust as high as 20 miles per hour. Saturday will be sunny with a high near 40, calm wind becoming west around 6 miles per hour in the morning. And here are a couple of events for the weekend. This weekend, saddle up for a rootin' tootin' good time as Rodgers and Hammerstein's classic musical Oklahoma rides onto the Milburn Stone Theater stage. Set against the backdrop of the American frontier, this beloved tale spins the story of love, rivalry, and the pioneering spirit that shaped the nation. Check milburnstone.com for times. And this Saturday from 1 to 4 p.m., sip and stroll through historic Chesapeake City while you sample from over 20 wine, beer, and spirit vendors. You will receive a commemorative wine glass to enjoy unlimited samples with the purchase of your ticket. It will be a magical day with a festive atmosphere as Bohemia Avenue is turned into a winter festival. Food will be available to purchase from many vendors. Tickets are $49.87. And this news item from the Capitol News Service. Egg prices have reached record highs due to the avian influenza, which has severely impacted poultry flocks across the U.S., including Maryland. The average consumer price for a dozen eggs hit $4.95, with wholesale prices peaking at $7.86. This has led to supply shortages, purchase limits in grocery stores, and menu changes in restaurants. Bird flu, specifically H5N1, has affected over 160 million birds since its detection in 2022 and has spread to mammals through though human cases remain rare. Experts warn that the virus could become more concerning if it mutates from human to human transmission. Despite concerns, eggs and poultry remain safe to eat when properly cooked. High demand, especially around Easter, and ongoing outbreaks mean prices are expected to stay elevated for now. And note, something I learned is that the big worry is someone who has the flu, the regular human flu, also picks up H5N1, which presents an opportunity for the viruses to sort of join or mutate and create a much more serious flu or virus. Anyway, today's feature. Today we're talking about the Underground Railroad with Cecil County historian Mike Dixon. The Underground Railroad was a network of secret routes and safe houses used by fugitive slaves to escape to the abolitionist northern United States. This is Mike's first visit to the morning show, but he has been a guest on Cecil TV many times. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Doug.
So, getting started, what made Cecil County an important part of the Underground Railroad?
Doug, it's one of the drivers of this county's history and whatever subject, whatever subject and almost any time period we'd think of. And it drives our history today. Its location. Here we are, right in the northeastern corner of Maryland. And if you're going to head to the north from points south, the Eastern Shore, Baltimore, Virginia, it brings you right through here. So many freedom seekers would take this route right across our county.
So they would come up like out of Baltimore and travel northwards.
Correct. They might come up the Chesapeake Bay, Doug, and in that case, the route would be, there are a couple ways they could go, but they could use the C&D Canal. And there are accounts of enslaved people prior to the Civil War being assisted by captains or using other methods, floating up the Chesapeake Bay somehow, but then taking the C&D Canal, maybe stowed away in the hull of the barge or something like that. But that would get them into Philadelphia. So see, that was really an optimum route. In addition, there was a railroad just north of the C&D Canal called the Newcastle of Frenchtown. And suppose they weren't going to go the canal waterway, they would be told, come up just north of the canal, look for a railroad. Railroads were really new in that era. It was like that was the first railroad in on Delmarva, and then they could follow the railroad tracks, and that would drop them off over at Newcastle, Delaware, and the same story up to Philadelphia. So that's one route. Well, then another, and we have many actually. Another one was basically the Amtrak line, except it wasn't the Amtrak line. So Frederick Douglass will begin his pursuit, will carry out his pursuit to freedom, basically following the Amtrak line. And if you want to visit a spot, go down by Perry Point, down by the Perryville Railroad Station, right there at the edge of the tracks. There was a ferry. Well, he takes that route. Um, there are others, such as along the Susquehanna, angling up through the countryside there, trying to get over the Mason-Dixon line into Pennsylvania, up into Chester County.
I mean, if they got that far, they were real close.
Yeah, in fact, once you get here, you're really close. Think of
Yeah.
think of how far, how short a distance rather freedom is from southern Cecil County, from other points in the county. It's either across the Delaware River in New Jersey would have been a place of freedom, or up into Pennsylvania. So we've
Right.
got that little corner going on.
So, who were the people who were assisting them? I mean, people could not make all these trips and connections and so forth and travel arrangements on
Mhm.
their own. Who were the helpers?
Well, there are some stories. Yeah, you had to have and you didn't. One of the challenges, Doug, with researching something like this is that you didn't want to leave a paper trail because you would be prosecuted criminally, because we are below the Mason-Dixon line. But I'll give you an idea. The most recent site to go to get listed on the Underground Railroad in the county is Union Bethel AME Church in Cecil. And you can visit. It's a beautiful little church there, off of Augustine Herman Highway. And the Park Service vets these, validates them, puts them through a pretty strong test to make sure they're good sites. Well, there was a strong pre-Civil War community of African Americans, and others that existed there. And so ministers in the church, I see family names like Jones. There was a white abolitionist teacher in town. They were assisting them with knowledge, information. Don't forget, geography would have been a strange thing to somebody from lower down the shore. Where do you go? Well, you hit that canal, or you hit that railroad track. So there was a nice, strong freedom seeker, emancipation-oriented community long before we talk about the Emancipation Proclamation that clustered around Union Bethel AME.
So, were these free black people?
Mostly, but some combination therein. The one young man I'm thinking of, Doug, his name is Jones. He self-emancipates himself from Cecilton just a little over a decade before the Civil War, and he was related to the Jones family. Joneses were ministers in that church that I'm talking about. And Doug, if you go across the Delaware River and you stop by Woodstown, New Jersey, maybe 15 minutes from the bridge, you can visit his Civil War tombstone. He escaped from here as a teenager, established a very successful life over there, learned how to read and write, got elected to the school board, was a prominent member of the community, prominent member of the church. Decades ago, we were taking an old house tour in Woodstown. It's a fine old place. And here was a certificate signed by Edward Richardson, who, by the way, was a teenager living in slavery in Cecil County.
Wow. So, do we have an idea of how many people
No, we don't. All we can do is because you didn't want this to. You really tried to keep this quiet, and so the records are very hard to come up with. But Doug, I think the numbers are large. Many will remain unknown to us simply because of location. Freedom seekers from throughout this region, this would have been the place for freedom. Well, we've got that long Pennsylvania Chester County border. There were places like around Lincoln University, Unionville, free black communities, Chester County officials, Chester County Quakers were largely supportive. There's strong centers of support, like up in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, the Quaker meeting houses. So that was a place for freedom up that way. You probably didn't leave much of a paper trail. But then right across the other side of the Delaware River, I'm always amazed how much Salem County, New Jersey, and its Quaker meeting houses and things played an active role. Right now, we're working on a current nomination that's a little bit different, Doug, for another location, a little village church called St. Augustine Episcopal Church down south of Chesapeake City.
And that church goes back that far?
Yeah, in fact, this one goes way back. It's a little different, and it's hasn't been accepted by the National Park Service yet. But its story is the Revolution. So when the British came through here in the 1770s, they offered freedom if enslaved people would come and fight for them. And so we've been able to identify 6 or 7 names in this case of people who responded to that call. You come and fight for the British Revolution. Now, this is like the Elk Neck campaign and all that. And when the war is over, you'll be granted your freedom. Well, we know how the war ended, and thus the reason we even know them, Doug, is the British transported them to Canada after the war because they couldn't return home, and they reestablished lives in Nova Scotia, in Canada. And of course, the British were organized, so they kept registers, and they'll say from Cecil County and things like that. So that's a work in progress. I'm really excited about it because it's like the earliest research we have on freedom seekers very early. Yeah. Fortunately, and the Park Service requires proof. So fortunately, we've got those ships registers. So I think we got pretty good evidence. And that we'll hear if the Park Service agrees with us sometime this year. And that is for St. Augustine Episcopal Church in that little village. And the reason the British, when they were invading the county, that's an area of plantations, so lots of enslaved people there, and we're able to associate some names to the region, and the British had a camp there.
So, what other sites around Cecil County can people visit that would, give them some more further insight into?
Yeah, so add Perryville to your list. Perryville is a very significant spot because of the railroad. That railroad carried more than a few people, some very prominent. I mentioned Frederick Douglass. There you can get a good feel for the trail, the history of the railroad, the route they were taking. They're not far away from freedom there once they get into Pennsylvania. So today for us, what is it, toward an hour, and maybe a little bit longer back then. And so that's as we celebrate the month, that's a good place to go. The C&D Canal, Doug, the C&D Canal Museum. So that has been and both of these have been recognized by the National Park Service. Visit the C&D Canal Museum. Its story is very similar, and there are several National Park Service accepted reports there. Other places you can visit are Union Bethel AME, the most recent location. And hopefully I'm back to tell you in a few months, St. Augustine has been added. And by the way, all these are nice, beautiful, historic spots. There are other places that have not been listed yet, and maybe they'll come up in the future. But like across the Susquehanna, kind of coming across the Susquehanna, heading up toward Rising Sun, actually heading up past Rising Sun, up toward like the Lincoln University area, Kennett Square. And there's a very active association, Underground Railroad History Association up in Kennett Square. It's a good place to keep an eye on for programming around
Mm,
this.
great. Well, Mike, this has been very informative, and and we it's an important part of Cecil County's history, so
Yeah.
we will keep our attention on it.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And thanks for watching Cecil TV. If you think programs like this are valuable, please consider becoming a donor to Cecil Public Media. Please like us on Facebook and subscribe to the Cecil TV YouTube channel. Have a great day.